Welcome to the Bare Metal Cyber CCISO Prepcast. This series helps you prepare for the exam with focused explanations and practical context. An effective security budgeting goes far beyond building a yearly plan and requesting approval. Once the budget is in place, the CISO is responsible for managing, tracking, adjusting, and defending it as new threats emerge, incidents unfold, and business conditions evolve. Ongoing budget management is a strategic function. It ensures that security remains aligned with business priorities, that spending supports measurable outcomes, and that financial decisions reinforce governance. The CISO's role includes maintaining day-to-day visibility across all cost categories, from operational tools and staff to projects and compliance. It also includes adjusting plans when real-world conditions shift. Serving as a financial liaison to executives, boards, finance teams, and auditors, the CISO must clearly articulate how every dollar spent contributes to risk reduction and regulatory readiness. Budget management is continuous, not cyclical. Every security budget includes several foundational components. Personnel is typically the largest, covering salaries, contractor fees, training, certifications, and recruitment efforts. These costs support security operations, engineering, GRC, threat intelligence, and other roles. Technology is another major area covering tools, platforms, subscriptions, licensing, upgrades, and hardware procurement. Services include managed detection and response, penetration testing, legal support, red teams, consulting, and third-party audits. Compliance costs involve regulatory assessments, control certifications, privacy readiness, audit remediation, and fines. Contingency funds are critical and often overlooked. These funds allow the organization to respond financially to emergency events such as data breaches, ransomware incidents, or urgent tool acquisitions. All of these elements must be planned, monitored, and adjusted based on performance, risk posture, and evolving business demands. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other podcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Monitoring budget performance begins with structured practices. Monthly or quarterly reviews of spending versus forecasted allocations are essential. These reviews identify overages, underutilization, and funding gaps. Financial dashboards allow CISOs and finance teams to visualize how budgets are distributed and whether spending is on track. Segmenting budgets into categories such as capital versus operating expenses or project-based versus functional spending helps clarify where money is flowing. Tracking variances allows the team to investigate root causes, whether an initiative stalled, a vendor under-delivered, or savings were realized. Forecasting and monitoring must be integrated with governance cycles so that financial updates can inform program-level reviews. These practices ensure the CISO can act before financial problems escalate and communicate adjustments with full transparency. Budget adjustments are inevitable. Shifting business priorities, newly discovered vulnerabilities, incident response needs, audit findings, or strategic decisions can all trigger reallocation of funds. The CISO must be ready to identify underused or surplus budget areas and redirect those funds to higher priority needs. This might involve pausing a non-urgent tool rollout in favor of strengthening endpoint controls, or deferring a policy automation project to allocate more resources to compliance audits. Adjustments must be supported by documentation that explains the rationale, including regulatory deadlines, threat exposure, or business risk. Coordination with finance is required to ensure that accounting entries, line entry reallocations, and carry-forward decisions are properly executed. Every adjustment must maintain traceability to its original allocation and updated justification. Communicating budget changes is a leadership task that requires clarity and context. Executives and board members must understand why a budget shift is occurring, what trade-offs are involved, and how risk is being addressed. The CISO must prepare clear executive summaries that translate financial changes into operational impact. Risk-based language helps frame decisions. For instance, explaining that delay of a specific initiative will increase exposure in a known control area, or that reallocation toward MDR services addresses a gap in 24/7 response capabilities. Project management, finance, and procurement teams must also be looped in to adjust delivery schedules, vendor engagements, and purchase orders. Changes to the security roadmap must be communicated in governance meetings so that leadership understands how financial decisions affect timelines, milestones, and outcomes. Budget constraints are a reality in most organizations. When funding is cut or restricted, the CISO must prioritize ruthlessly. The first step is to identify initiatives that are non-essential or can be deferred without introducing unacceptable risk. Enhancements, pilot programs, or non-regulatory improvements often fall into this category. The second step is to evaluate cost-efficient alternatives, such as switching to a shared or managed service, implementing automation to reduce manual workload, or using open-source tools in non-critical areas. Some risks may need to be formally accepted if the cost of mitigation exceeds current financial capacity. These decisions must be documented, reviewed by governance committees, and approved by executive leadership. Phased implementation is another option, delivering partial functionality now while planning for full rollout later. Throughout this process, the CISO must ensure that minimum viable security coverage is maintained for critical functions such as monitoring, access control, and incident response. When emergencies strike, budget agility becomes essential. Whether responding to a major data breach, a ransomware outbreak, or a high-profile vulnerability requiring urgent patching, the CISO must act quickly to fund the response. Contingency funds or reserve lines provide flexibility, but only if they are pre-approved and understood across leadership. Emergency procurement processes must allow for expedited vendor engagement, tool acquisition, or contractor deployment. Every dollar spent during a crisis must be tracked with documentation that supports later review. This includes purchase orders, approvals, timelines, and operational justifications. After the incident, the CISO must assess whether the budget structure was adequate or exposed gaps. Post-incident reports should use financial data to advocate for stronger contingency reserves and faster approval paths. Incident costs are often the most persuasive data points for future funding requests. Governance structures provide the controls needed for responsible budget management. Authority levels for budget changes must be defined: who can approve reallocations, emergency spend, or contract changes. Documentation requirements ensure that every adjustment is traceable, defensible, and auditable. Financial policies must align with procurement rules, internal controls, and external standards. This includes maintaining compliance with contracts, licenses, and vendor agreements. Fraud prevention is also a concern. Segregation of duties, approval chains, and periodic reviews reduce the risk of unauthorized transactions. Including finance, legal, and risk management budget governance processes ensures broader accountability. The CSO must ensure that all financial decisions are executed within the approved structure, and that governance reviews include financial as well as operational metrics. Metrics provide visibility into how the budget is performing. Budget utilization rate, actual spend versus planned allocation, is one of the most important. It reveals whether teams are keeping pace, underspending, or exceeding forecasts. Other useful metrics include cost per control, cost per incident mitigated, and cost per audit finding remediated. Vendor optimization can yield measurable savings, especially when duplicate tools are retired or service contracts renegotiated. Spending impact should be tied to risk scores, audit pass rates, and control maturity levels. Dashboards should combine financial and performance metrics so that leadership sees how budget decisions translate into outcomes. The CSIO must ensure that these metrics are maintained, reported consistently, and used to drive continuous improvement in budgeting practices. The CCISO exam includes several topics tied to dynamic budget management. Key terminology includes budget reallocation, contingency funding, run rate, and utilization rate. Scenario-based questions may describe a breach requiring emergency spend, a stalled project due to underfunding, or a board challenge to a new budget request. Candidates must demonstrate how they would respond, strategically reallocating funds, documenting decisions, and communicating trade-offs. They must show that they understand how budgeting links to program execution, risk posture, audit outcomes, and cross-functional collaboration. The CISO must also demonstrate financial integrity, ensuring that funds are used responsibly, decisions are documented, and all changes are aligned with business priorities and governance expectations. Budget management does not exist in a vacuum. It touches every function of the security program. Roadmap delivery depends on timely funding. Audit remediation depends on resource availability. Vendor strategy is shaped by cost performance and renewal schedules. Incident response readiness depends on budget agility. Even employee morale and talent retention can be affected by how well the CISO manages training budgets or team resources. Financial stewardship is a visible signal to executives and boards that the CISO can lead a mature, trustworthy, and accountable program. This stewardship builds credibility, which in turn unlocks more influence, funding, and strategic integration. In the end, budget management is not about tracking spreadsheets. It is about ensuring that every financial decision advances security outcomes that matter. It is about knowing when to pivot, when to pause, and when to ask for more. It is about defending the enterprise not only with firewalls and incident response playbooks, but with clear, disciplined, and transparent use of financial resources. The exam will test your ability to lead under financial pressure, to justify risk-based decisions, and to align spending with business resilience. Mastering these principles prepares you to lead not only a secure organization, but also a fiscally responsible one. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Bare Metal Cyberside CISO Prepcast. For more episodes, tools, and study support, visit us at baremetalcyber.com.